Hey everyone, I'm John Coogan, and this is my analysis of the Cyberpunk 2077 launch fiasco. To be clear, this isn't a game review channel by any means, so I'm going to be focusing on the business of Cyberpunk. I've been enjoying the game for a few weeks now, but I completely understand why people who bought this game with high expectations are frustrated. Regardless of what you think about the game, there are some important lessons about launching a product that every entrepreneur should pay attention to, so that's what I'm going to focus on today. Let's start with a little history. Cyberpunk is an action RPG created by a Polish company called CD Projekt. The company is the largest video game maker in Poland, but is actually fairly small by American standards. They are currently worth $8 billion, which is about the same as Discord. They aren't really a startup though, since they've been around since the mid-90s, but because their business involves launching entirely new games on a regular basis, each new title they release acts somewhat like a small startup. CD Projekt has an interesting backstory. The founders started by selling cracked copies of Western video games in Warsaw, Poland as kids. Once they got older and started wanting to do business legitimately, they focused on importing games from the United States. As demand for American games grew in Poland, they started offering translation services to American game developers so that the games could be enjoyed by Polish people who didn't speak English. This business grew with the overall rising popularity of video games, and it paved the way for them to start making their own games. CD Projekt's main hit has been the Witcher franchise, which includes 3 main games as well as a few expansions and spin-offs. It's also been adapted into a Netflix original series starring Henry Cavill. CD Projekt was in the perfect position to work on The Witcher because the author of the books that the series is based on is Polish, and CD Projekt is a Polish company. The Witcher series has been a massive success, earning multiple Game of the Year awards and helping CD Projekt go public on the Polish stock exchange. After seeing so much success with the Witcher adaptation, CD Projekt set out to find new intellectual property to base their next game off of. They settled on an old tabletop role-playing game from the 1980s called Cyberpunk. Expectations were immediately sky high for Cyberpunk 2077, and CD Projekt did nothing to calm fans down. They brought Keanu Reeves on to play one of the main characters, and even had him hype the game to fans at E3. Just look at how he sold the game.
Cyberpunk is set in a metropolis of the future, where body modification has become an obsession. You play as an outlaw, an enhanced mercenary working in the sleazy underbelly of the city. Yeah. Okay, but let me tell you, the feeling of being there, of walking the streets of the future, is really going to be breathtaking.
But when the game finally launched after multiple delays, it was riddled with bugs and was nearly unplayable on current generation consoles like the PS4 and Xbox One. Textures were low resolution, animations were buggy, and some problems would even kill your character instantly or even crash the game entirely. Generally, the game was a mess, and fans weren't happy. CD Projekt's stock dropped 20% after the launch, and they quickly began offering refunds to gamers who were unhappy with their purchase. Many online stores began issuing warnings to customers about the game's issues, and Sony even went as far as to pull the game entirely from their online store. My experience with the game has been generally positive. I'm a big fan of the cyberpunk aesthetic, and I like action RPGs as a genre. While I have experienced a few bugs while playing, I'm running the game on a custom-built PC with a high-end graphics card, so most of the issues haven't been a problem. I'm also not the type to binge play a game the day it comes out, so I've been able to avoid the worst bugs just by downloading updates. I'm also more forgiving of bugs generally, since I'm an early adopter by nature, and this isn't the first game by CD Projekt to have issues at launch. When they launched the first Witcher game, it was far from perfect. They actually released an enhanced edition of that game a full year later, which upgraded the graphics and fixed many bugs. And they pulled off something even more impressive with the third installment of The Witcher. When The Witcher 3 was released in 2015 for PC, PS4, and Xbox One, it was widely called one of the best video games ever made, and was praised for its expansive open world. 4 years later, CD Projekt was able to port the game to the Nintendo Switch, a portable gaming console with a fraction of the computing power of the other platforms. So if anyone can get Cyberpunk to eventually run smoothly on older hardware, it's CD Projekt. But while I don't doubt that the engineers and game designers at CD Projekt can build a great game, I do have reservations about their marketing strategy. By endlessly hyping the game, they really damaged their reputation in the gaming community. Over 8 million people had pre-ordered the game, and they expected a flawless experience on day one. If a game company is uncertain about their ability to deliver a polished product at launch, they usually release into early access, allowing gamers to play a limited version of the game. This lets them get tons of real-world feedback and test for bugs across a much wider range of hardware. But launching into early access can be humbling for a big company, and it can also be less profitable. Often, early access games are sold at a discounted price, and it can be hard to deploy a huge marketing budget effectively when the game has already been kind of available for fans. As we've seen time and time again, there's very little substitute for real-world feedback. Video games are the perfect medium for rapid iteration, and that's why most of the highest grossing games of all time are services that add features consistently over time. Games like Minecraft, Roblox, and Fortnite have all grown in public with real-world players testing new features as they roll out. But these games have the advantage of not being primarily narrative-driven. The Cyberpunk fiasco is so interesting to me because it has several deeply ironic aspects to it. First, the game's narrative focuses on themes of inequality and corporate abuse, but the game only runs well on expensive custom-built PCs, leaving gamers who can't afford the latest gaming hardware behind. To be fair, this isn't entirely CD Projekt's fault. They began the development of Cyberpunk 8 years ago. That's before the release of the original PS4. Development took so long, though, that by the time the game was ready, the PS5 was already available. And these two consoles have significantly different capabilities. The graphics processing unit in the PS5 is almost 6 times as powerful as the PS4's, and it has twice as much memory. So making a game that takes advantage of next-gen hardware like the PS5 will naturally lead to some compromises on legacy consoles. But I wonder how deeply the team at CD Projekt thought about all this. It seems odd to write a whole story about the problems of inequality while releasing a product that will ultimately leave less wealthy customers unsatisfied. I think they're doing the right thing by offering refunds to these customers, but it feels like they should have delayed the console release entirely. It's not uncommon for games to launch on one platform and then expand to other platforms later, like CD Projekt did with the Nintendo version of The Witcher. Doing this pushes revenues further out into the future, though, and that has a real business cost. The second ironic twist here involves a particular bug some gamers have been experiencing. In certain situations, if the player gets too many items in their inventory, the file that saves their progress will be corrupted entirely, forcing them to start the game over from the beginning. This is ironic because, without spoiling the story, one of the major plot points in the game involves a kind of ticking time bomb. It's funny that there's a race against the clock both in the main story of the game as well as the real world. You have to finish the game before gathering too many items, or you might lose your progress and have to start over. I think the story of the Cyberpunk launch should be instructive to entrepreneurs who are launching anything new. It always pays to get your product into the hands of real users as soon as possible. We saw Quibi make the terrible mistake of launching blindly without feedback, and it cost them the entire company. Even with a few successful launches under your belt, you aren't exempt from real-world feedback, so try to beta test new products with your most dedicated users before you announce a specific launch date. Early signs point to Cyberpunk still being a profitable game, even with the launch debacle, but it's unclear how much this will hurt CD Projekt's reputation in the future. Hopefully, they continue improving the game until it becomes a fan favorite, but only time will tell. So, have you played Cyberpunk? Let me know what you think about the game in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. I don't plan on covering video games regularly, but when I see an interesting business case about a game, I'll talk about it. So thanks for watching.